Hello, everyone. Welcome to MIA Podcast. Very, very excited to be introducing our new formats for the show. So our new host, Steve Bambury from Growth Partners. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, John.
So Steve is a company that works with a company that we've partnered up with. Very, very unique offering, which is helping a lot of manufacturers in Australia and New Zealand be able to really tap into markets that they may not have touched before and dominate markets that may be traditionally or spaces that are owned by other businesses as well in the SEO and the content space. So it ties into what we're covering today. We'll find out a bit more as we progress through the show. If your business is suffering from some of the fatigue, like your phone isn't ringing as much as it used to, your sales teams isn't getting the results that they used to, and you're just wondering where your customers are sitting, Steve's your man, and together we're presenting solutions that will fit manufacturers as well. So to tie in with that, we've got a very, very special guest, Greg. Steve, do you want to do a quick intro to Greg, and then we'll let Greg jump in as well?
Absolutely. Thanks, John. And look, it's my pleasure today to introduce you to Greg Gladman. Greg and I have been working together for a number of years now. Greg is the founder and the CEO of an organisation called Sales and Leadership Performance. And Greg has worked with literally dozens and dozens of manufacturers across Australasia and assisted them to grow their organisation in ways that they've not thought of before. And Greg has got his finger on the pulse. He's working with companies every single day. And we've invited him along today, and I'm absolutely delighted that you've joined us today, Greg. So welcome along, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Steve. I'm happy to be here and hope we can share some insights with the audience.
Thanks.
Yes. Fantastic. So, Greg, do you want to kick off? I always like to get a bit of a background behind the business that you're operating, around how it started and what you do as a business as well.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for that. Look, we work with business-to-business companies that are really focused on getting significant growth year on year. And what we do is probably a little different to what a lot of other organisations do, where we actually come in and actually do a full analysis of current state, look at where their future state or what their aspirations are for growth, and put in like a customised development plan. So while we follow a fairly formulaic approach, where we focus time and energy really depends on what we find in the assessment piece and what the focus is for the business and how and where they're wanting to grow. So it's a very unique offer where we actually have a partnership for growth, where myself and our coaches partnering with the company to help them to execute their growth strategy. And one of our unique points of difference, which we'll probably end up talking about later on in the conversation as well, is that we're the only sales development company in the world that offers a 3 times return on investment guarantee. So whatever the client spent on their coaching dollar, we guarantee they'll bring in 3 times that in additional GP dollars. So point of difference will be something that I'm sure will come up later in the conversation today, and that's one of ours.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm pretty excited by that. 3 times return and guaranteed as well. I know Steve was giving me a bit of a heads up around that guarantee as well. And, from a business perspective, it's pretty impressive. So what I'd like to do is, obviously, majority of our listeners are from manufacturing in Australia of some form. We'll tap into the manufacturing focused questions. I think we can just continue our discussion as it goes along as well. One of the biggest challenges at the moment that we're seeing with manufacturers, and I think has been since the decline of what I would say the glory days of manufacturing in the 60s and 70s, is this whole concept of, we've seen the concept of made in Australia. It's had resurgences. Dick Smith was a huge advocate. We've had various pushes for this whole made in Australia, where people would consciously pick up an item in the grocery store and say, oh, is it made in Australia? I better purchase it. Overseas competition. But I think what we're finding at the moment, that made in Australia is not necessarily enough in today's market. What would you say around what you're and what's actually happening and what a manufacturer is doing about it?
Yeah, it's a great topic. And one thing I would say is, in line with your, things are changing over the years, is that we saw a massive push across our client base in Australia during the period of COVID, where there were massive supply chain issues, supply issues, and just real struggles with getting the products that they were getting manufactured offshore into the country and then out to their client base. So we've definitely seen across our clients a real push to try and see what else they can do in Australia, and then how could they lever that as a unique selling proposition with their customer base. So I think, for any manufacturers out there that are listening today, if there are things that you're doing to shore up your supply through doing more stuff onshore, it's really important to have a look at, how can you lever that? How could you use that to your advantage around sort of making, that part of your positioning statement or part of your offering to the market? The thing I would say is, just by putting a Made in Australia logo on a product or on your website is actually not going to drive the result that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because I'm going to take the angle that there's a lot of people out there that are probably a little bit somewhat cynical to some respect, in that, especially a website, legal aside, you can pretty much put anything you want on a website. And I think people have had a lot of that over the years. But I think, something that we're definitely seeing, which is more the advantage of that Made in Australia, and you're right, coming in from an angle of your USP, is that whole point of there's definitely an environmental green angle where, that Made in Australia, there's less transport costs, there's less risk of obviously supply chain issues we saw during COVID, but definitely that environmental layer is starting to become more important these days, and that social push for people to want environmentally sustainable products that, we're known for quality and it's going to last longer as well. But I think definitely that transport cost is a big one as well.
Yeah. It's an interesting point there. Sorry to interrupt you there, Greg. Just an interesting point there. You talk about quality and we talk about unique selling propositions or unique value propositions. So many companies out there, you ask them what sets them apart, and they'll talk about quality. Oh, it's the quality of our work. Or it's made in Australia. And yes, Made in Australia has got that connotation to it, that it is a quality product. But in today's environment, it's just simply not enough. And a lot of companies struggle to be able to extract what's uniquely different about them. And I know, Greg, and all the time I've been working with you, that's one of your superpowers, I guess, is the ability to unlock that differentiator, because everyone says their quality is good, right? And in today's world, that's just simply not enough, is it?
Great one. You took the words out of my mouth, Steve. And I often tell clients at the start of our engagement that, we're going to challenge you and we're going to ask you tough questions around some of these, statements around Made in Australia or Australian owned and run. And, I always like to give it the so what factor. And, so what? What does it actually mean for your customer? And do they care? Because there's no point banging on about being Australian made or Australian owned if your customer or your demographic doesn't care about it. However, there are ways that we can actually influence them by asking questions to make them think about it and care about it and bring it to top of mind. But often we just do what we call the show up and throw up, where we just tell them, that we're Australian made and hope that that's going to get them excited and make them want to buy from us. But it's the key is actually asking great questions to actually establish whether the supply chain efficiency is important, whether continuity of supply, delivery in full on time, are these things important to them, which tie back to that the benefits that Made in Australia will actually give them.
Yeah, great points.
Yeah, okay. I love that food of thought, and I love for me, I love that concept of challenging something that we do take for granted. Us as marketers, it's easy just to put something on your site saying, hey, we provide great service. It's not. I'm sure there's no businesses out there that say, "Hey, we provide terrible service, so go with us." So you've got to dig deep and find out what really makes you tick. And I always love from the marketing angle. I'm gonna go red herring for a second here. One of the industries that we're focusing on this year is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is very topical. It's going to become part of normal business, I think, in the next year or two anyway. So many cybersecurity companies out there are just saying, hey, we do cyber, these are our list of services, and you can almost carbon copy their business and say, hey, we've started another cybersecurity business. And I think that tapping into definitely what you do as well, Greg, is helping them realize that they didn't start a business to be the same as everyone else. They started a business to have some uniqueness. Everyone's got their own path. Help them get back into their path and toot their horn as to why their path is so good for that specific segment of the marketplace as well.
100%. And what I'd say too, John, is that with that differentiation and helping them to find that sweet spot where We talk about distinctive capabilities, things that are hard or impossible for your competitors to match or to do. And if we can find 2 or 3 of those distinctive capabilities that are hard or impossible for competitors to match, and we can actually make sure that's what things that the customer wants, because that's another thing, is often that we have all these bells and whistles that customers don't care about. So if we can tie those 2 or 3 distinctive capabilities back to something that customers really care about, it not only helps us to grow sales, but the key thing is it helps us to grow profit, because we're no longer a Me Too product. We're now seen as a premium product that has features and benefits that we really want and need. So it takes the price away from the cost per month per user in a cyber space to the total cost of keeping the business safe from cyber attack. And it is a game changer when companies can really sit back and actually find out what are their distinctive capabilities and how do we use them inside the sales process to grow profit, obviously via sales.
I love that notion of distinctive capabilities, because it takes you away from that price-based conversation that you're alluding to. If there's no differentiator and there's no distinctive capability, then the only conversation that's left on the table is price. And if you're a manufacturer that's sitting there being hammered on price all the time, then I would suggest that you don't have a distinctive capability that's important in the eyes of your customer. Great point.
Yeah, or you're not communicating it, or you're not asking the right questions for them to tell you that they care about those things. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That's a really good point you just touched on there, Greg, where maybe they're aware of it, but they're not communicating it. They take it for granted. I know with some of the stuff we do, and back in the past, and I know other businesses we've worked with, you hear their story and it's just like, hang on, backtrack for a sec. That thing that you just said, that's actually pretty important. So I'll just tap in a little bit. Like, my manufacturers tend to be, I'm saying in general here, more sort of engineering sort of based, analytical based. How do you find that process of really tapping into their uniqueness? When is manufacturing more difficult than, say, some other industries, or similar?
That's an interesting. It's sometimes harder to get them to think the more warm and flowery feature and benefits and what does it mean for the client. But that's what we coach them through that by asking questions. And one of the questions I often ask, John, is think of the last customer that you signed on, who's your ideal customer. Why did they buy from you? What actually made them buy from you versus your competitor? And chances are those things that pop up through those conversations are the distinctive capabilities or the things that set them aside. On the flip side, once we can actually build out those distinctive capabilities and how we weave them into the sales process by asking great questions to make customers want that stuff, engineers or people with that engineering mindset are the easiest to coach around following a sales process, because the characteristics of a great sales process is it's a consistent, repeatable process that you don't take shortcuts and you don't skip key points of it. And that's what engineers and people like accountants are great at, because they follow a process. So while it is sometimes harder to get them to think about some of the distinctive capabilities and how we would actually utilize those, once we've got them on the right page, they follow the process to a T, and we can get great results with them.
Yeah, not only great results, but consistently great results, right, by following that process.
Yeah, it's formulaic. So we know that if the more activity we do with those ideal target markets and target audiences that have those pains and frustrations, we know that we're going to get more sales, and we're not wasting time with people who aren't going to buy.
Yeah, lovely.
Cool. Yep. Adoption. Yeah, there you go. Our next question is more about some of the struggles that manufacturers are going through at the moment. So broadly speaking, what are you seeing as some of the biggest roadblocks for growth that manufacturers are struggling with right now?
I think the biggest one that we're seeing is that phones have stopped ringing. We had a real boom, sort of 3 or more years there, sort of leading into and then sort of post-COVID, where there was massive demands on the industrial sector and the manufacturing sector in Australia. And because of the inability to buy stuff offshore or the long lead times, that there was a huge push to buy Australian and buy local, because there was no other option, and they had to find new suppliers and And so manufacturers' phones were ringing off the hook. Now, the downside of that is that a lot of their sales teams haven't sold for 3 years. They've been order takers. They've literally been answering phones, taking orders and shipping stuff out. So what that's actually done is it's caused a bit of a hole in that, that their sales teams are no longer proactively going out and chasing and hunting those ideal customers. They're not picking up the phone as much and having those conversations. And, we've seen that pretty much across the board in every industry, but I'd say the manufacturing sector has been hit the hardest because, now that supply chains are freeing up and, international trade is flowing a lot better, and we are starting to see the initial signs of the, construction and engineering industry starting to dip and the economy slowing down slightly. Those two are sort of like hit at a crossroads where phones aren't ringing. People are not order takers anymore. And in some cases, they've forgotten how to sell, as crazy as that sounds, because they've had 2 or 3 years of just picking up phones and taking orders. They've got out of the habit or the routine around, what a high-performing salesperson should be doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Look, John, one of the challenges that we see is that, and it's right across the board, multiple industries, but no more so than I guess in the manufacturing industry, and that is that companies don't believe that their audience is online. They've always felt that it's been word of mouth, or like you say, Greg, that the phone's ringing because they don't have another choice, so that the phone's ringing in that regard. But now the phone stopped ringing. Right? What's happened? Well, we've seen through the pandemic, we've seen this massive shift in buyer behaviour where customers now are turning to Google in the billions. Now, there are billions of searches every single month in Google Australia. So people are choosing to do their research online in their own time at their own pace. And that's very different to how we used to sell, where we'd proactively go out there and we would meet with our customers. Our customers are harder to get to. They've got gatekeepers in the way in many cases. And like I say, manufacturers don't believe their audience is online. But we've seen that shift. We've seen a massive shift in buyer behavior. And that's one of the things that we work very closely with to identify where is that audience? Where are they? How are they searching and how are they behaving? And being able to understand that is a shift in the understanding of how we need to sell differently and how the buyers are behaving differently. And also gives us some insight in terms of how our sales team need to be responding to that shift in buyer behaviour, leading back into what you're talking about, Greg.
Spot on. And great point, Stephen. I think when we're looking at building out a best practice sales process, now we have to really think about the different pathways that leads are coming in. And Google is a key pathway, and more and more people are now picking up the keyboard and typing in, manufacturer of XYZ near me, and if you're not popping up in that search, your phones are not ringing. So and that's just not one example of many. But if manufacturers are seeing a website as a digital landing page that has some cool colours and some pictures and some testimonials, they're absolutely missing out on a massive market share, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from what we've seen from the marketing angle as well, is that as generations push forward, websites probably came out. I started building websites in 95. So what's that? 30 years of websites. That's a generation or two. You're absolutely right. Like, people naturally just jump on their phones these days, and I think significantly more than even 5 years ago. We'll see it when I see it when I'm traveling to work. Everyone's buried in their phone. There's so much that is just phone based these days. Traditionally, when we're out networking as well, you hand someone a business card, first thing they say is, "Oh, check out your website." And we're absolutely right here in saying that, websites that are built for a brochureware website, they're not going to cut the mustard anymore. People want more. People want to do research in their own hours, gather their own facts, research competitors as well, and form their own knowledge base. And that's when they'll hit up your sales team.
Totally.
Look, I'd say, guys, that we've worked with literally hundreds of businesses across Australia, and New Zealand, and often when you look at when we're starting the first engagement with a client, we're looking at their website. it's rare that I can look at that website and I can be very clear around who their ideal customer is. Who are they trying to sell to? And, without sort of, being disrespectful, I often got to say to them, look, I've had a good look at your website. I can see what you sell, but I haven't got clarity over who you're actually trying to sell that to. Who's your ideal avatar? What does that target audience, target market look like? And that's an issue, because if I can't work that out in my game, what chance has your potential customer got of working out if they're the right fit for you, and vice versa?
Just in your experience, we look at the solution side now. What would you see as some of the solutions that have unblocked those roadblocks? We've talked about a couple already, but if you've got some specific examples you want to talk about, that'd be fantastic as well.
Yeah, well, I think sort of following on the flow of what we've just spoken about, really having a really good deep dive into your digital footprint. How do customers see you online? And is your messaging and your product offerings, depending on how much detail it's going into, does it actually speak to your ideal client? And getting professional help to do that, because what we find is that an in-house junior marketing person might have finished university last year, who's working on their first formal website, is not going to know what good looks like. And so if they're just trying to, usually their focus is making it look prettier, making sure that there's consistency of colors and fonts and logos, but the strategic ability to assess that strategically is just not there. So I'd say that's definitely something that all businesses should definitely, hold the mirror up and have a look at themselves at. Are we really speaking to the right market and the right audience, and engaging someone who's a professional at doing that? I think making sure that you're, once you're very clear on that target market, target audience, and who that avatar is, making sure that you're actually taking the time out to map out, what is it that you do that speaks to that audience, and how do we utilize that in our sales process? And I think the third one, sort of with the roadblock being the phone's not ringing, is I don't think any business in 2024 and beyond should be 100% focused on expecting the phone to ring or people to be emailing or having a Google inquiry. That should be one leg on the chair. We should be having a targeted approach around lead generation, where the digital footprint or the digital marketing is a key piece of that, but it's not 100% reliant on that. And Steve, be great if you could maybe speak to some of the changes in algorithms that Google does just out of the air that can have a massive impact on the performance of your website. That if you haven't got a partner who's all over that, your Google traffic or leads can go from large volumes to nothing in the space of a month. And we've definitely seen that from our client base in the last 12 months, with Google making so many changes to how they prioritize websites and who they send where. We've got customers that have had followed the same strategy for 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden their leads have fallen off the cliff and they don't know why.
Yeah, and look, it's a really good point, Greg. Google themselves tell us that every year 16 to 20% of all searches that they see are new. So they're completely new. So if you're doing things the same as you were 2 or 3 years ago, chances are you're not going to be seen as relevant to Google. And we talk a lot about Google. Currently, they've got 93% market share in Australia. So they're the gorilla in the room that we need to be seen as relevant for. And to the point that you were making earlier on, that this change in buyer behavior means that we're doing our own research in our own time, and the way that we're searching, if it's constantly changing, we need to constantly change the way that our website presents itself to that audience. It's no longer good enough to have website content that's just essentially a nice glossy brochure, because the only way that you're going to find that brochure is if you give someone out a business card, and that's what it's going to do for you. We've actually got to align it to the way that your customers are behaving online, the way that they're searching online. Some customers are searching and are looking for videos, so Google will trigger a result for videos, but not all videos are created equal. So it's a combination of multiple factors that are influencing the way that companies are going to find you now, and it's very, very different to the way that it was before. So that's only accelerating. 2024, we've got the rise of AI, and we've seen all the search engines now have got some degree of AI-powered generative way of responding to search to make sure that we're putting the most relevant customers in front of you. Change is one thing that's constant.
I'll make a note on that whole AI layer as well. I've got a couple of points, but I think the first one is AI. Like, AI is fantastic. It's really helping businesses from a lot of different angles. It's definitely, I think it was the buzzword of 2023. What we see is a lot of businesses now start to build their own content via AI. Great, it ticks boxes, it gets content on your website. I think the really important thing for people to remember is that once you've tapped into who your target audience is and what your unique selling position is, you then have to write accordingly. So AI is a good starting point, but you have to adjust. Firstly, so you don't look the same as your competitor, but secondly, so it actually resonates with your target market as well. So, I mean, I always say there's no point putting content up there if no one's going to read it. Box ticking content exercises don't achieve that much in the long term. Short term, yeah, you might get a few wins, but definitely the whole point is that, if you've written an article, a landing page, or whatever it might be, and then you're sharing that via socials, via newsletters, whatever that might be as well, they has to be engaging to those specific people as well.
Yeah, John, can I be vulnerable and share a personal story about my own business?
Please do.
So I've known and worked with Steve for 10 plus years, and in about 2022, Steve dragged me kicking and screaming to do exactly what we're talking about with my own business. And I had just paid to get a website built, and like I said earlier, and I was speaking from personal experience, it looked pretty. The colours and the flow and everything is, wow, your website looks amazing. Steve very tactfully pointed out, and then he ratcheted that up to the stage where he basically hit me in the face with it, that Google can't find you. And when we went through a process of actually assessing my website, Steve, I can't remember the score, but I think I might have got a 1 or 1.5% out of 100 for Google's ability to find me and send me the right type of lead. It was atrocious.
Yeah, let's just say it wasn't high. It
wasn't good. And that was quite disheartening, given that I'd probably just spent 20 grand on a website that was absolute garbage. I wasn't getting any leads. I wasn't getting any new opportunities coming through. And, while I'm very clear on my target market and target audience, the stuff that I was putting on the website wasn't what people were searching. And so I had to let go of the stuff that I love to talk about and the things that I'm passionate about, and actually start writing articles and getting Steve's team to help me write articles on stuff that people were searching that was relevant in today's environment. And, I went from a website that was getting 0 leads per month to a website that was sort of giving me sort of 6 to 10 quality leads a month that were closable, to the point where I had to get Steve's team to turn down the intensity because I couldn't actually handle the volume of inbound inquiries coming in. And it was quite I'll say it's a simple process to go through, but it was an absolute eye-opener for me, and hence now it's given me a new appreciation for my clients. When I'm working with them from a sales angle, are you talking to your ideal customer, and are you writing and posting stuff that they care about, but most importantly, that they're searching for? Because if we're not writing content and posting content for stuff that they're searching for, they're not going to find us.
Yeah, and I think it's the perfect blend between, I guess, the work that we're doing and the work that you're doing, Greg, because we can help change a website so that people can find you and come into the top of the funnel, if you like. But then as they go through that funnel, if we haven't got the differentiators in place and the unique value propositions in place, the work that you're doing with them, then we're still going to lose them on the way through. So it's a combination of factors that make a fundamental and significant difference to the outcome.
Yeah, look, there are definitely times where customers are coming to us for, let's say, sales training. We need to grow more, get more sales or grow more sales, and often we have to actually get them to pause and first have a look at, are they clear on who their customer is and why people buy from them? Do they have enough leads coming in or enough opportunities coming into their pipeline, for the sales training and coaching to actually have any impact? Because if the phone's not ringing, if Google's not sending leads, all the sales training in the world is not going to turn around the problem.
Just to flow in a little bit further from that as well, is understanding your customer in terms of where they're going to be. Absolutely, search engines, I think, are probably either first or second step for a lot of people. There's also the brand awareness piece in terms of, and I'm probably getting more into the digital marketing angle, but I know in terms of, say, something like social media, if all of us remember when Facebook first hit social media, most of us probably looked at it and just went, it's just for teenagers. Now, I think the 30 to probably 40 to 50 age bracket is the fastest growing area in Facebook. My mum, who's in her 80s, is a whiz at Facebook. But I look at like TikTok. I think there's a lot of manufacturers and other industries that look at TikTok as in, probably 3-4 years ago, it was the platform where you did some dances online. I wasn't particularly interested. It's where a lot of people are starting to spend their time these days. And some manufacturers, to have that brand awareness piece on a platform like TikTok to introduce them to the brand, to then essentially set the seed. I always say you're probably not going to get any leads from TikTok, but definitely an awareness piece to help show your differentiation in the market, which then leads the person to then plant the seed to then make inquiries via search engines and whatnot further on as well. But I would say definitely have a look outside the boxes that we all live in and look at other angles as well.
It's a really good point, John. You talk about awareness. When we're selling in a complex environment, like so many manufacturers are today, they're selling a product that requires a consultative sales process. In other words, you're not going to see their product, see one piece of information about it, pull the credit card out and spend $5,000 or $10,000. You're going to have multiple questions that you want to answer. So we look at, the work that we're doing with websites with yourself, John. We look at creating, if you like, a digital sales concierge, which allows the website to act as not just a brochure, but a piece of information or an information full of information content that allows customers to go through that journey from awareness, I've never heard of you before, and then start answering their questions. And by doing that, we're building trust. We're building trust, and by building trust, we keep them engaged. And as they go deeper into the conversation, we can start putting our differentiators in front of them. The work that you're doing, Greg, that allows us to set us apart from everybody else and not just be another me too. So by the time they come out as a highly qualified lead, they might have consumed 5, 10, maybe even more pieces of content. And consumers now are choosing to do their own research in their own time at their own pace. And that's where the combination of having a website that understands that with those compelling differentiators, those distinctive capabilities that you talk about, Greg, as part of that on your website, qualifying and disqualifying, then the quality of leads that come out the bottom are so much better. And that's certainly, I know, what you've experienced within your own business. It's not just one
100%.
thing. It's a combination of all of those things coming together.
Spot on. And I think it's really important that you don't want to, whether it's lead generation or what you're doing to get the phone ringing, you don't want to be a one-trick pony. You've got to have the ability to be able to speak to that audience in different formats, in different medias, and in sometimes different voices, depending on, because some of our clients will have 2 or 3 key verticals, and each one we need to speak in a different voice. So how do we do that? Like if we have one website that just has one voice and we've got 3 different verticals that we specialize in, how do we get those messages across in a way that each of those verticals can consume it and get excited about wanting to reach out and talk to us? Yeah,
that's a really good point. That user experience on a website needs to be customized so that you're talking to buyers that want to feel uniquely different. You're selling to different industries. You might be selling to the aviation industry as opposed to the automobile industry. Well, if you come from one of those industries, if you're in the auto industry, you don't necessarily want to be consuming content that's all around aviation or something else, because we feel that our businesses are uniquely different. We've got to give them a different experience. And that's part of the website content that you need to have to take them on that journey.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
I'm going to switch it out a little bit. One of the questions I always ask is like, do you feel that Australian manufacturing will ever return to the glory days of the 60s? So I'll just let that one ferment for a few minutes. But question that is on everyone's tongues is what's going to happen with, I think, the economy, and secondly, manufacturing in 2024. There's a lot happening. You mentioned the building industry. I think a lot of people say the building industry is sort of coming back to some sort of normality. There's a lot, we've seen the US, Japan just hit a technical recession, UK's just hit a technical recession. I always think Australia is probably just going to bounce out because we've always been able to leverage off mining. What's your take on 2024, Greg?
I probably err on the side of caution, and I'm really urging all of our manufacturing and all of our clients really to plan for the worst. And if you're planning for the worst, as in that the phones aren't ringing and things are slowing down, we talk about with our clients, if the size of the pie is shrinking and getting smaller, how do we help you to take a bigger chunk of a smaller pie? And that's going to be critical. And yes, I'm not doomsday, Australia's in recession and the sky's falling. But we are definitely seeing key indicators in certain industries like new home builders, building and construction companies that are doing sort of unit complexes. They've gone from a lot of them have gone from a ballot system where you were going into a drawer to have your name drawn out to go and stand in queue and sleep overnight to buy a property, to the phone not ringing. So there's definitely a bump that has come for some industries already. And it's starting to come from others now. We've had a huge influx in what we say business to high spend consumer. So think things like dentistry, hair loss, things where people are buying high ticket items for themselves. They've just fallen off a cliff in the last 6 months. People are not discretionary spend at that sort of more higher end, sort of $1,000 plus items has absolutely fallen through the floor. So it's going to be critical. If you fall into that space, you're going to have to work a lot harder and a lot smarter to be able to make sure that you're actually growing, that unfair market share in your industry.
Yeah. Look, I totally agree. I think you're absolutely right. When times are getting tougher, it's the time that you need to be investing, because if the overall addressable market is declining, you've got to pick up your market share, and you've got to pick up your market share by telling a different story to what your competitors are. Because if you've always done what you've always done, you're going to always get what you've always got. And for things to change, you've got to make some changes in your organisation. It's time to consider those changes and think about what you can do to encapsulate all the things that we're talking about today that's going to allow you to grow that piece of the pie that's getting smaller.
And the last question I've got, Greg, is back to that. Will Australian manufacturing return to the glory days of the 60s? I think we can all agree that there was definitely a honeymoon period post-COVID where manufacturing, we definitely, percentage of GDP had a nice little upward bump. I'd love to hear your thoughts around what you think is going to happen over the next few years for Australian manufacturing specifically.
I'll get my crystal ball out. I think that we are in a great position to really lever what was already starting to happen with all the supply chain challenges and issues during that COVID period, and be able to really use that as a differentiator and be able to ramp up Australian manufacturing. The obvious elephant in the room is the cost of labour here. That is probably the most limiting factor. I certainly don't want to make this session today in any way political, but I think if there is some incentivisation for businesses in the way of maybe some sort of tax relief or other incentives to do so, I think there's no reason at all why we can't significantly ramp up the number of products that are being manufactured here versus elsewhere. There is definitely a place in the market for a premium product that has guaranteed supply. But unfortunately, I would say that probably 90% of the manufacturers that we deal with have a self-limiting belief that 20 to 50% of their clients make a decision purely on price. Now, we're constantly challenging our clients on that, because there's countless universities around the world that have showed that between 5 and 10% of people make decision based on price. The rest seem to be making decisions on price because they haven't seen your differentiation or your value offering. So if we can get really good at differentiating why our product or service offering should be purchased at a premium, I think that is going to allow us to do more onshore and be able to again secure up supply and be able to to bring it back closer to the glory days. I don't think we're going to get back to as strong as what it was, just because of our rising labour costs in Australia. It can be very limiting, but there's certainly a big gap there between what it is and what it could be in a profitable state.
Yeah,
I
totally agree with that. I think, John, to answer your question, we've got the opportunity to turn things around, but we've got to make a change. As I think it was Jim Ryan said, for things to change, we need to change, and for things to get better, we need to get better. So we've got to look at our digital footprint. That's where our audience has gone to. They've gone into a digital environment. So we need to look at our digital footprint and make some changes to that so that we can capture an audience, a much bigger audience than what we're capturing at the moment. And then we need to look at how do we differentiate ourselves and sell on value as opposed to price. It's fascinating that we have this mindset. So many people that we talk to have got this mindset that it's all around price. When it's not, as you say, Greg. The research is clear. It's only a very small percentage that are focused on price, and they're only focused on price if you haven't got a differentiator that allows you to have a value-based conversation. Premium products. There's a market for premium products. We've just got to engage our audience, take them on a journey, and show them why it makes sense to invest in premium, and we can start turning this around and get Australian manufacturing back to in the right direction and going back to where it was in those times of old.
I love it. I always throw my 10 cents in, I look at Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, he certainly gave American manufacturing a boost in confidence, sort of set them back into, I think, at least having a larger segment of the overseas market. Australia has always been known for quality and providing value around manufacturing. I say every episode, I'd love to see Australia toot its horn a little bit more, maybe not necessarily beat their chest in the same way as America, but definitely get that word out there and help people understand why local is worth it and why it's the value of local is as well. We're almost at the point where wrap up today's show. I think for those who are listening and those that are probably, whether you're skeptical or whether you're just uncertain of where your target audience is sitting these days, if you are suffering from phone not ringing, your sales team sort of running around, your BDMs not getting the results that they used to, what should they do, Steve?
Well, John, we've been working pretty hard over the last little while to come up with a process to allow manufacturers to understand where is their audience. Have they moved online, and to what extent they have? So we've put together a digital growth audit, which allows companies to understand where their audience has moved to and what their growth potential is for a digital investment. It's a complimentary assessment. If you're interested in that, then don't hesitate to reach out. We'll take you through a process and help you to understand why those phones might not be ringing, and more importantly, what you can do about it.
Yep. And if you are listening only, we'll have the link to that in the show notes. But if you go to miapodcast.com.au, that will take you to the free digital audit, which you can take advantage of to at least understand where your market is. And like we've all said, to be able to then take advantage of knowing where your market is and being able to work with someone like Greg to articulate what your unique position is, and then to be able to have people knocking on your doors, essentially. Thank you again. I'll say Steve first for coming on first show as a new host. Thank you again, Steve. And huge thank you for Greg for jumping on and sharing your wisdom as well. If people want to know, or our listeners want to know more about your services and your business, where should they go?
You should go to our website. We've now got that humming. So if you, our website is www.saleslp.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn if that's easier. More than open to having a chat with any Australian manufacturers. I started off my working career as a food scientist and food technologist, so had 20 plus years in food manufacturing. So, when I'm looking at, manufacturers in Australia, whether it be engineering, industrial or food, I've got a bit of a soft spot for that space. So more than happy to have a conversation with anyone from the podcast who would just like to have a chat and explore, what they may be able to do to try and get those sales pumping.
Fantastic. And to our listeners, thank you for listening, watching, however you consume our podcast. We'll see you in our next show. And thanks again to Greg and Steve.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, guys.